not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history, what body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psychology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
Friday Java, our magazine program on the 3rd of November 2017, the first program for the month of November from WBRN Radio in Boston on the Boston Red Network. We'll start the program with the people from the University of Virginia, the Crystal Ball, that's Larry Sabato's shop, and unfortunately the site of the death of Heather Heyer. But we'll look at it and the Old Dominion state and a little bit of its history before we go to their write-up. Is called Signs and Pretense. We are looking back in Virginia and in New Jersey. This is by Kyle Klondike and Godfrey Skelling writing on Skelly. I don't know why I did it. Anyway, on the 2nd of November. And we'll start off with theirs, and then we'll go into a historical. In an off-year long on election commentary, but short on actual elections. Two main events on the Spartan political calendar are upon us. In New Jersey and in Virginia, we'll elect new governors next week. The stakes are high, particularly for the Democrats. Well, in New Jersey, and New Jersey is a very awkward state in that it is comprised of many, many small towns. And the largest city being Newark, New Jersey, across the river from New York. The large influence in New Jersey of Wall Street and people that work in and around Wall Street. They fund campaigns in New Jersey from the outgoing Governor Tuton Christie, former federal prosecutor, and the now Senator Cory Booker, the mayor of the urban ghetto of New Jersey, formerly the Twitter king. He's been overtaken by DJ Trump. Incidentally, old DJ's Twitter site was deactivated by an outgoing Twitter worker, and DJ was literally off the air. He's now restored, and if you look on our marquee, you'll see the activation notice, people looking for the real DJ Trump, and he wasn't there. He wasn't behind curtain 1, curtain 2, or curtain 3. So that was the end of that story there. Let's move on here. As we have argued before, the only way Democrats can be judged to have a good night is if they sweep both governorships. Republicans will already hold a massive 34 to 15 advantage in state governorships. There's one independent, Bill Walker, out in Alaska. The two races decided next week are currently split. Democrats hold Virginia, and Republicans, of course, hold New Jersey. A flip-flop with Democrats winning the Garden State, that's New Jersey, and Republicans capturing the Old Dominion State. Now, what has to be remembered about the Old Dominion State, the Commonwealth of Virginia? That was a place that Mr. Robert E. Lee called an honorable man by the president's chief of staff, the disgraced former Marine Corps General Kelly. And there have been various narratives written by about Lee, that he was a happy slaveholder, etc. We have to fall back here upon Professor Reed of Oakland, who tells the story in a dynamic way and a superior narrative that Lee was no more than a hyena, period, and we'll let it go at that. The story was an early version of fake news to glorify a fascist past known as the Confederacy. But that does run deep in parts of Virginia, and this is what this race is all about. The Republican Gillespie, who incidentally is from New Jersey, has run that type of campaign. What Huey Long would call, and it doesn't apply to him, but I'm a cracker, you're a cracker too, basically is the campaign, and he wrapped it around the Confederate flag. That's to get the rural elements in Virginia and tie them up. That's the game plan with what they can, as a base of DJ Trump's base. Those are down in the Shenandoah Valley, etc. Now, Nathan is evidently from those areas, and try to split in the suburb and other areas around the Washington, D.C. area, where they're not going to do as well. So that is a sensible game plan based upon a turnout. These off-year elections, normally the turnouts are lower than, say, a presidential year. In Virginia was a little different in 2016. The monster did a good job, Clinton in Virginia. Of course, Barack Obama carried Virginia twice. They're behind on the strength of followers of O.J. Simpson. We need say no more. A Democratic sweep, meanwhile, would represent progress for the minor party, although Republicans could say that Democrats had an advantage, an advantageous, environment in both states. Well, Gillespie's tried before, and he's lost. This time around, it's a little bit different. Various polls from our Hampton University showed the party had Gillespie ahead by 9 points, and various other polls have shown Quinnipiac Nathan ahead, and Nathan ahead by a few points, and they go to the averages. Now, we don't use these averages here, but we'll just tell you basically the president often hinders his party in an off-year election, particularly if the president is unpopular. DJ Trump is unpopular, but he is more popular in rural Virginia. Looks as weak now as he has at any point in his operation, and they falling back here. His ratings are around 40%, below 40%. Gallup does a lot of work, incidentally, on the presidential race approval ratings, and they are primarily the only one that comes out daily with this. They go to the 538 and the Huff and Puff poster, the Real Clear channel, Real Clear Politics average. These three averages show the Democrats with an edge in the House generic ballot from 6 to 10 points. You can look at it with a grain of salt, but basically, just looking at this, the Democrats are ahead by 3 to 4 points. And around the kinds of numbers that might suggest a Democratic wave next year, a flip in the party control of the House, well, that depends on a lot of things. Now, a lot of Republicans are resigning from the House, but those are in very red states, so we have to look at that again. But the 2017 elections are a few days off. The environment for Republicans is poor. And the announcement of the indictment of Paul Manafort, one of the big problems there, a lot of people don't remember Paul Manafort, and DJ Trump tweeted about that there. Now, as far as an upset in Jersey over Phil Murray, the polls, public and private polls, have been consistent that basically Murray's ahead by about 10 points. And if you look at the margin of error, that is Murphy's race to lose. An upset in Virginia, Ed Gillespie over Northam is not difficult at all to fasten. Gillespie has run a nasty campaign. That's one way of putting it. Restoring voting rights to sex offenders. Those things do count, especially when you're dealing with older people. In a race like that, they mention a victory fund, an outside group produced an ad portraying Gillespie backers chasing non-white children in a truck. Well, anyway, that they killed Heather. Anyway, the Democrats argued that Gillespie's ads have ended up hurting Republicans in some areas. In other areas, it tends to cement their particular advantage in Trump-leaning areas. What it does for independents will be the story of the night. The Northam campaign has not hit the Gillespie campaign very hard. They are scared to, and they point out that could be a problem. It is sometimes, many times, a problem, and they issue the Virginia people, University of Virginia people, mention the Hampton University poll that was showing Gillespie up by about 8, when in actuality we looked at it, and we featured it, the crosstabs and what have you. It's more like about 6 or 7 points. Anyway, Quinnipiac had him up by 17. That's probably an outliner there. If anyone could accuse a poster of heading towards the end, there are going to be at least some posters who finished far from the eventful margin. No doubt Steve Shepard over at Politico is noted, but many posters surveying Virginia, of course, have used polls based on calling people on a voter list. That works better in an election that is a low turnout election. On voter lists there, and as opposed to a random digital dialing. We've used a random digital dialing here in our polls, small polls, since 1988. We've not polled Virginia. But anyway, the techniques are much better today than what we had. We had random analog dialing. Anyway, the voter list polls with which mimic the technology used by campaigns finds a narrow range of House race predictions from Gillespie to 1 to Northam by 7. Thus roughly the range of internet polls we've heard about throughout the range. The real clear average, Carl Rove likes to use this, we'll hear from him tomorrow night, is about 3.5%, basically where we were, just using our using our slide rule. Not big enough to consider him more than a modest favorite, but and only then because of the small polling leads can be reinforced by generic advantages any Democrat might have in the race. If Clinton were president, Gillespie might be the one favored right now for the reasons we've put into more detail below. Go to Mark Warner. 3 years ago, Gillespie may have closed hard at the end, although our sources on both sides do not do not indicate that there had been much movement in the race either way for weeks, and the bulk of evidence continues to suggest a small Northam lead, but Gillespie win would not be surprising, as Trump owned a national victory a few years ago. Well, it's a little bit different there. DJ Trump in some areas was leading. Ohio, for example, a state that Republicans have to win. He had been consistently on top in polls we looked at and in our model in Florida, for instance. Now, Pennsylvania was a different situation, a very, very close state. He ended up by 40,000 votes. But remember, DJ Trump won the presidency by around 80,000 votes. If you look into Ohio, you look into Wisconsin and Michigan. Had the monster won Wisconsin, Michigan been much, much closer. Pennsylvania, excuse me. Pennsylvania, they got the votes they could out of the Philadelphia region, the extra burbs, and out of Pittsburgh. But in the middle of the state that they call Little Alabama, that area, more voters came out. And not unusual there. Now, wrapping oneself in the Confederate flag in Virginia could indeed cause something of this nature to happen. Now, these posters like to look at old elections in 1969 gubernatorial election. You have to remember, in 1969 in Virginia, apartheid was still there. The 68 election featured George C. Wallace, which complicated the two-on-one analysis. The one way to overcome this is to look at the two-party vote, look to solidly Democratic. Well, in Virginia at that time was solidly Democratic. And if you go with Wallace, voters largely preferred Nixon in the two-party race that was against Hubert Horatio Humphrey. That's not unusual there for Virginia. Virginia has been a state that has primarily been Republican. We can think of Robb there, the son-in-law of Lyndon Baines Johnson, long-serving senator there in Virginia. But many of the governors there, the way that they've set their terms up in Virginia, have been Republicans. So we don't have to go there. Now, Terry McCulloch was a different situation there. He lost one, and he won one. Won't go into the machinations there. Over in Jersey, will Phil Murphy outrun Hillary Clinton? Well, it honestly doesn't matter there. Tuton Christie in 2013, that was after the election, the re-election of Barack Obama, won by 22 points he should not have won by. And if you remember, in Virginia, there was a man named Craig Dees, and he was from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. His campaign really never got off the mat, and McDonald won. Of course, McDonald ended up at the federal courthouse there at the end of his term. Those charges, of course, have been dropped against McDonald. Very complicated case there. Hillary Monster Clinton had 14 points in Virginia. Now, again, this was an election, an all-out campaign there in the extra burbs and suburban races around Washington, D.C. So let's go to that. This is a very, very long article. We will append it here. Some of Virginia trends to watch out for on election night. Polls, of course, close at 11 o'clock. Chesterfield County, suburban county south of Richmond. That's where General Lee set up. Traditionally a Republican-leaning area, but recently has been more competitive. In 2013, Cusinetti won Chesterfield by 9 points in a two-party race. The Libertarian was also, he got 9.5 there. So it kind of shows you where they are. Gillespie won at Chesterfield by 9 points, while narrowly losing the state. This is to Mark Warner. That was in the 2014. Gillespie's been a utility player. That was when after Barack Obama's re-election. In 2016, DJ Trump carried the county by 2 points, very close in Chesterfield. So we'll look and see where that turns out. In Fairfax County, about 14% of the Commonwealth population is by far the state's largest locality. Typically has been one of the last reporting in the state. Is particularly true of its large absentee voting precincts on election night 216. DJ Trump led in Virginia late into the evening, only to suddenly fall behind when Fairfax came in. And of course, Fairfax County has a lot of followers of O.J. Simpson. A little more than one-fifth of the county's votes were absentee or provisional ballots, and together they were 121,000, were 3% of the statewide vote. Outside of Fairfax, only 5 of the locations in the state had more votes cast there. More broadly, an interesting question is just how Virginia's 2016 ships are replicated. Well, we don't know yet. Because off-year elections are usually harder to predict where they are going. And let's finish this up. In 2017, it looks like more like 13 or 14. That would suggest that the state's polarization has taken at least a small step backward from its height of 2016, but 2017 looks more like, if it looks more like 2016, that may suggest that the urban-rural divide in the Old Dominion state continues to be quite pronounced. It will be pronounced with the flag coming out there. That's one of the things you guard against. Let's just do a little general thing here as our time is dogging us. DJ Trump will take off to Asia. He'll be there for a while. Literally embarks later today. And he'll be visiting quite a few countries there. And he'll end up in Vietnam and the Philippines under that nut. I forget what his name is right now. It doesn't really matter. He's crazy. He will tour Japan, and he'll go to the Korean Republic. He will visit China, Vietnam, the Philippines, his first trip to China. He'll be in Korea. There's saber rattling there already, sending attack long-range bombers and what have you through that area there. The Philippines are from Friday to November 4th. Will take him out of Washington. Yeah. Anyway, he'll leave town while the Republicans work on this Robin Hood in reverse type setup there. The last time a U.S. president was in Asia for so long was in 1991 and early 1992 when George H.W. Bush became ill, I remember, in Japan. Well, DJ Trump is no George H.W. Bush. Trump will visit Japan and Korea in search of national unity, of course, against the North. Well, that'd be easy to do. He'll go to Beijing, and President Xi is firmly in control in Beijing. He'll attend an Asian Pacific Economic Corporation summit in Vietnam. So he'll be in make a state visit to Hanoi, ending his trip with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Manila. That is on the cookie down there. The tax plan, we'll cover it more tomorrow night on the Week That Was. We'll have a special broadcast on it. 442 pages representing what would be the largest overhaul of the tax system since the 70s, slashing corporate rates to 20% from 35%. Cutting tax rates on individuals and families, ending certain loopholes. Now, this is where the rubber will meet the road, so to speak. Number of provisions will hit taxpayers in Democratic-leaning states. Well, that's by design. The legislation, incidentally, is called the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. The alternative minimum, they've been wanting to deal with it for a long time. They will dump it. The estate tax, which affects very few people, and lowering, of course, the rates and phasing that out. That is pretty much what it is all about. And Trump told lawmakers he's counting on them to maintain the momentum for the tax cuts, repeat his request that Congress send him the legislation to sign for Turkey Day on the 23rd of November. So anyway, the tax brackets to 4 from 7, a 12% tax bracket to get the poor, working poor, a 25% one, which will have more people in it, and 35, and they'll have a leftover 39, supposedly. The home builders have blasted the legislation, saying it would damage housing prices. They really don't care about them. The group said the provision in the bill capping the interest deduction for future homes at $500,000 left half the amount was unacceptable. 7 million homes are currently above $500,000, and of course, if you look in Seattle, the minimum price there is $850,000 plus. And again, high regions like Washington D.C., New York City, California, and Hawaii. Provisions would affect Americans in high tax states: California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Illinois. According to Paulie Ryan, a family of four will save $1,182 annually on their tax bill. They will up the standard deduction here. And from our old friend there, Lloyd Doggett, he says, like the Trump University degree, it is phony. He goes on, ultimately what American people really get from this tax plan is a huge bill for the deficit incurred to pay for tax breaks that line the pockets of DJ Trump personally and with billionaires out there. So the thing around 401ks, we don't know where that will go. It would repeal the personal exemption of $4,050 that are currently claimed for themselves, their spouses, and their dependents. It will double the standard deduction. So that is one of the things that will come up here. So in other words, the tax preparers of the world will suffer from this when people quite understand what's going on. U.S. equities rallied in 2017 to a series of high records. Shares of home builders fell after the bill was released. We look to Toll Brothers as one, and they will not be doing very well under this. And the majority there at 52 to 48 there. And just looking at a little bit of a roundup of the Washington Post here, is basically the same thing. They're trying to get the French, incidentally, to intervene with Iran. And the president of Iran says, forget about it. It's not going to happen, period. And just looking at some of the other things here, Twitter blames a departing worker. We already covered that. Deactivated DJ Trump's account. So DJ wasn't able to Twitter for a few minutes, so they discovered and, of course, restored his privileges. So this is basically it. Let's just look at the polling real quickly here as we're in this now. On some of our outlets, you'll get this production a little later than others, and it'll be about the same on most all of our outlets tonight or this morning, actually. This is Thursday's polling. Suffolk came into it. They have their poll that shows Northam at about 4, so that is where it would come in by 1 or 2 points of victory there for Northam if that appears. The Pew people have DJ at 34, Gallup at 38, and an outliner there called Rasmussen at 43. He's been there. That was on a Thursday. Monmouth has Murphy ahead by 14 in Jersey. The approval rating for DJ Trump on Wednesday, 39 at CBS, 36 at Reuters. You can see where this is going. The internet poll, YouGov at 43. And let's see what. Generic ballot here. This is from YouGov. Democrats up by 3. Reuters has Democrats up by 4. So that's basically discrepancies there. The Washington Post poll on Tuesday had Northam at 5. So you can see this race is tightening up from these public polls. So we go from 8 at Hampton University for Gillespie on the other side. Gillespie by 1 at one of these polls. Gillespie down by 5. Gillespie down by 4. So you have to look at the margin of error there. Tomorrow night we will look at these polls and see exactly where they are. And we'll have more on the World Series. We'll do a special program on that. Congratulating again the Houston Astros of the American League. They used to be in the National League. in their 5-1 victory in Los Angeles over the Dodgers of the National League, and finally winning it 4-1. Unfortunate situation. The pitching of the Dodgers folded up. Mr. Kershaw put an honorable mention out there. The relievers couldn't exactly get it done. And then, of course, the offense by the Dodgers, and they had opportunities, but Houston's pitching was most of the time superior. Houston's closer fell apart. They didn't throw it to him along Giles. Mr. Giles was out of the ball game. Kenley Jansen showed up, but was not dominant. He gave up some home runs. And why was this? He was used just simply too much in the games preceding up to it, and also in some of the championship games with the Cubbies, and particularly with Arizona. So that's pretty much a summary of where we are on the 3rd of November. For Friday Jobber, this is Boston Red and WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. Incidentally, you can find us on YouTube, as many of you are doing. You can also find us on Stitcher. We're going more and more to a mobile landscape. We'll address more of that as we get into more mobile programming. And as we move over to Android, we should have been there long ago, being an Android developer. Anyway. But we will post there, and also at the same time, the RSS feed for people that want to deal with it are there. We still do some programming on Blog Talk, usually a shorter version of the network version. And, of course, we're on Spreaker and on iHeart. iHeart gets the full network version of it. And we'll see where we are here as we continue to make adjustments. Our modular program moves forward. Finally, we pretty much got the story of Catalona. We'll get that one up. And also our coverage of the Women's Convention. We invite you to look into it as we move along on that venture. And we have the Seattle mayoral race, so that debate, we have it. We'll get it up this weekend. There's another one with the People's Party. I'm not sure when we'll get that up. These are on Tuesday races. Nonetheless, have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on Monday morning, quarterback. Good day.